High in the Carpathian Mountains, perched above a dangerous gorge, lie the ruins of a fortress feared even by armies. This is not a fairy tale castle. This is Poenari, the true stronghold of Vlad the Impaler, the ruler who inspired the legend of Dracula. To reach it, you must climb hundreds of steps, just as enemies once did, knowing many would never return. Poenari Castle stands dramatically above the Argic River, on a cliff so steep it's nearly impossible to assault. Its story begins long before Dracula, back in the 13th century, when Wallachian rulers first recognized the strategic value of this high perch. They built a small fortress here, a watchtower to control the mountain pass. But it was in the 5th-10th century, under the command of Vlad III, that Poenari was transformed into the formidable stronghold we know today. Unlike the ornate romantic castles you might see in picture books, Poenari was all business. Its design had 3 clear purposes: defense, control, and survival. Its primary function was to be a defensive bastion, a place where a small force could hold off a much larger army. From its vantage point, Vlad's soldiers could monitor the Transfagergican mountain pass, controlling the flow of trade and troops between Wallachia and Transylvania. And during a siege, its thick walls and strategic position were meant to ensure the survival of its defenders. The location itself was its greatest weapon. Enemies would have to climb a sheer cliff face under a barrage of arrows and rocks. Poenari wasn't just a castle. It was a declaration of defiance carved in stone. To understand Poenari, you have to understand the man who made it his own. Vlad III, known to history as Vlad the Impaler, and to legend as Dracula. He ruled Wallachia during a turbulent era, constantly battling the overwhelming might of the Ottoman Empire on one side and treacherous local nobles, the boyars, on the other. He needed a place of absolute security, a refuge he could trust when all else failed. Poenari was that place. A chilling legend surrounds its reconstruction. It's said that Vlad, seeking to punish disloyal boyars who had conspired against his family, forced them and their families to rebuild the castle. The story goes that they were marched from his court at Targovic to Poenari and forced to labor until their fine clothes were shredded and many dropped dead from exhaustion. While we can't confirm if this gruesome tale is completely true, it perfectly captures Vlad's reputation. He was known for his ruthless discipline and his use of fear as a political weapon. For Vlad, absolute control was not a desire. It was a necessity for survival. Poenari became the ultimate symbol of that control, his personal eagle's nest, his last line of defense against a world that wanted him dead. And it was during one of the most desperate moments of his reign that Poenari played its most famous role. As the massive Ottoman army, led by Sultan Mehmed II himself, swept through Wallachia, they eventually cornered Vlad at his mountain fortress. The siege of Poenari began. But Vlad was a master of guerrilla warfare and knew these mountains better than anyone. As the enemy forces closed in, he didn't wait to be captured. He fled, using secret paths through the dense Carpathian forest to slip through the Ottoman lines and escape to fight another day. But not everyone escaped. According to a powerful legend, Vlad's wife Anastasia faced a different fate. Rather than be captured and taken as a prize by the Ottoman invaders, she chose her own destiny. She climbed to the castle's highest tower, declared she would rather be eaten by the fish of the Argic than surrender, and leaped into the abyss. The river below is still known today as Ral Domnai, which translates to the Lady's River, a permanent memorial to her tragic act of defiance. Poenari had held, its walls were not breached, but its golden age was over. Vlad's escape marked the beginning of the end for his rule and for the fortress itself. After Vlad's final fall from power and his death in battle, Poenari Castle gradually lost its strategic importance. Without its master, the fortress was just another remote outpost. It was abandoned, left to the mercy of the elements. Over the centuries, nature did what armies could not. Earthquakes shook its foundations, causing parts of the walls to crumble and slide down the mountainside. Landslides further weakened its structure, and the relentless cycle of seasons wore away at the stone. Unlike Bran Castle, which was later renovated and turned into a royal residence, Poenari was never rebuilt for comfort or tourism. It was left in its raw, ruined state. And that's precisely what makes it so special today. What remains is not a polished museum piece, but an authentic medieval fortress frozen in time. Its broken walls and empty chambers tell a truer story of Vlad's world, a world of brutal conflict and constant struggle, not of Gothic romance. Visiting Poenari is like stepping into a time machine, back to an era of iron and stone. Now, let's address the big question: Poenari versus Bran, which is the real Dracula's castle. For decades, Bran Castle, with its picturesque towers and dramatic setting, has been marketed to the world as the home of Dracula. Millions of tourists flock there every year. But here's the historical truth. The connection between Vlad the Impaler and Bran Castle is incredibly thin. He may have been imprisoned there briefly, or maybe passed through the area, but he never ruled from it. It was never his stronghold. Poenari, on the other hand, has a direct, undeniable connection to the historical Vlad. We know he personally invested in reinforcing and expanding the fortress. It served as one of his main residences and his most important strategic stronghold. Historical records and archaeological evidence all point to Poenari as Vlad's true base of power. While Bran Castle represents the fictional, literary Dracula of Bram Stoker's novel, Poenari represents the real man, the fierce, ruthless, and brilliant military commander. Bran is the fantasy. Poenari is the terrifying reality. It's where you can feel the raw, authentic history behind the world's most famous vampire legend. So, what is it like to visit Poenari today? It's not a casual afternoon trip. It's a pilgrimage. To reach the ruins, you must first conquer the mountain. Your journey begins at the base of the cliff, where a staircase of 1,480 steep, modern steps cuts its way up through the dense forest. The climb is a challenge, a physical test that filters out casual tourists and leaves only those truly dedicated to reaching the top. It gives you a small taste of the ordeal enemies would have faced trying to assault the castle. When you finally emerge at the summit, breathless and sweating, you're rewarded not with gift shops or costumed actors, but with something far more profound. You stand among the ruined walls, looking out over the same breathtaking, panoramic views that Vlad himself would have seen. The silence is absolute, broken only by the wind whistling through the empty arrow slits. There is no luxury, no crowds, just the raw power of history and nature. You can walk the crumbling ramparts, peer down into the gorge, and let your imagination fill in the gaps. It's an experience that feels personal, ancient, and deeply authentic. Poenari Castle is not a myth, it is a scar carved into the mountains. It's a place where power, fear, and the desperate will to survive defined a ruler who would become a legend. To stand on its ruins is to understand the real Dracula not as a creature of fiction, but as a product of his brutal time. It is history, raw and unfiltered. Thanks for joining me on this journey to the real castle of Dracula. If you enjoyed this dive into history, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. See you next time.